you reach scale, like StumblePoint is, we're at 30 million users and we serve about 40 million uniques a month, I believe. We're at a pretty large scale, but our team size is not, doesn't reflect that. So having one engineer who's dedicated out of an engineering team of 40 to supporting, let's say, an internal A/B testing tool isn't the most effective use of resources when you could be paying somebody, let's say, the price of an engineer, but it never breaks or never fails. So when you're making a decision about custom tools, non-custom tools, generally there's a sort of delta of additional benefit that you are gaining for a custom tool. And like my recommendation to anybody is to consider that delta needs to be supported over a length of time and add in the deficit of tech debt. Having a custom tool, you need to have a support team readily available to continue to build on it and iterate and add new features, just like a third-party tool you're using. Mm-hmm. And a lot of companies that go with a custom route are simply doing it because they can't give up that little delta of not having as much insight as they would like. But at one hand, lean analytics says that if you can't easily measure it, if it's not something that's readily intuitive, then it's probably not a good metric. There are circumstances where you measure too much and you actually can't get useful insights into your product.
So I saw a great workshop by you in Miami, and you talked about startup metrics. Can you give some best practices to the average startup out there when they get started? What should they be tracking in order to measure growth? I know you can't go into the whole workshop, which is all about that, but just some summary of some of those takeaways.
The best metrics are the ones that are actionable, that are timely, and they come in very quickly as a short feedback loop in our time lists, that over the course of a year, even though it's very timely, you actually can measure yourself and saying, I'm actually improving or not improving. Those are like sort of the top three qualities of metrics that I look for. And then so the secondary would be something like conversion rates are generally, in my opinion, better than aggregate numbers or nominal numbers, because conversion rate generally is efficiency or a percentage of effort that you're trying to expend to receive a gain, versus nominal, it's not as insightful. Mm-hmm. To me, it can be just as actionable, but it's just not as insightful as a conversion rate. At the early stage level, when you're dealing with, let's say, your founder team of 30 people, you have a lot of advantages and disadvantages when it comes to analytics. One, you actually don't have a lot of things you actually can track, because you can't actually be scientifically or statistically. I can't statistically prove that things I'm doing is valuable at such a low traffic level. So you should pick a metric that is something you can do two things with, that you could qualitatively prove you could quantitatively prove if you had the means to do so, as in more data, but you could qualitatively also support that is oriented towards your core business. So it would also depend on sort of your type of goals as a company. If you wanted to be a small business and orient yourself to like a no funding direction, then I would say support or have metrics that are oriented to monetization as fast as possible. But if you're going to an investor route and a VC route, they only care about generally one thing, which is growth. And so if you can prove growth, which is generally registrations, right, then you can. Then basically, it's much easier for an investor to believe that in the future that you will possibly monetize. VCs and investors generally are looking for, at least for startups, are looking for a faster return. We're talking about 3 or 5 years versus small businesses 10 to 15. So that's why they're investing in such. That's why the capital is so risky, and so that's why as startups you also are risky as well. So, but a caveat to that is that focusing only on acquisition before your core product is actually a core product, and it actually is fitting somewhere within a market that can scale, then focusing on acquisition is not the best. I mean, you can invent a viral loop to where you get 6 million people, and you can probably some lower quality money on that premise, but their bet is not your viral loop, because the viral loop is not a product; it's just a cycle that which people go through. So the best way to measure core product is generally determine the type of market that you're targeting and whether or not you're retaining those people properly. That's a key mistake that a lot of startups miss, is that they look at retention and they think it's positive, but they don't understand why it's positive. And you need to figure out what type of customer is staying, which ones are leaving, and then orient yourself in product development direction around that. But look at time on site is generally a good one when you don't have a lot of strong, strong. We're gonna have a lot of traffic. Overall retention is a good one. So you could just say how many people are coming back at a certain date and just make that sort of the binary of like is retained or not retained. But when you're in such a small scale, it's not the best use of your time to try to develop A/B tests or some ways to just really improve your product. A lot of it's much more qualitative gut feeling, and you can use A/B tests to just sort of guide yourself, but you can't 100% fully rely on it because it's not like you can run a test and it looks positive, but if you can't statistically prove it, and it's like it's a p-value of less, less than like 15 or 10, which means you're 20% likely or 15% likely you're going to be wrong. I mean, it's not the best sort of conclusion. That's a pretty big margin. You want to be in the ranges of like 95%, like likely that it's, false positive or something like that.